Hello everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to have you here today. Today, we'll explore how unlocking better decisions can be achieved through the fascinating interplay of demographic diversity and ideological homogeneity. Our presentation is titled, When Non-Differences Make a Difference. Over the next few slides, we'll dive into how these factors influence decision-making processes and what that means for us. So, let's get started and see what insights we can uncover together. When we look at representative bodies, we see that they tend to earn greater public trust. This is what we call broader legitimacy. When diverse groups are involved, the public perceives decisions as more legitimate and credible. Having people from varied backgrounds also surfaces overlooked considerations. Different life experiences help highlight issues that might otherwise be missed, leading to more well-rounded discussions. This diversity ultimately results in better decision quality. When more viewpoints are brought into the room, it reduces individual biases that can skew judgments. The collective input helps us make more balanced, thoughtful decisions. Enhanced fairness is another key benefit. When perspectives are shaped by different lived experiences, it challenges assumptions, reveals blind spots, and makes it more likely that decisions are fairer and of higher quality. For decades, the prevailing wisdom in organizational and legal scholarship has been that increasing demographic diversity is the main way to reduce bias among decision-makers and improve group outcomes. In essence, the idea is that diversity isn't just about fairness. It's about making better, more informed, and more legitimate decisions across the board. Demographic composition alone doesn't guarantee that a group will have the cognitive processes needed to overcome bias. It's not just about having diverse members. It's about creating the right conditions for that diversity to be truly effective. Without these conditions, members might self-censor or hold back from sharing their unique perspectives, which limits the potential for innovative thinking. This leads us to what I call the missing link, those crucial factors that turn diversity into real value. One common challenge is integration failures. Homophily, or our natural tendency to stick with similar others, and social categorization can create subtle subgroup boundaries within teams. These fault lines restrict genuine information exchange and collaboration. And then there are in-group dynamics. Even with diverse groups, we often see that the promise of diversity isn't fully realized in practice. Research consistently shows a gap between the potential benefits and the actual impact on group performance. Finally, I want to highlight an often unseen hurdle: social integration problems. These issues can quietly undermine the entire process, making it harder for diverse teams to come together effectively and truly leverage the power of their differences. So, understanding and addressing these social dynamics is key to turning diversity into real, meaningful progress. Without ideological cohesion, having a diverse group in terms of demographics can actually increase conflict rather than improve the quality of our deliberations. When everyone shares similar ideas and beliefs, differences in background become something we can see as an asset, something that enriches our thinking. This creates what we call integrative complexity, which means considering multiple perspectives carefully before reaching a decision. The key takeaway here is that demographic diversity really only leads to meaningful benefits, like reducing biases, when the group also shares a common ideological ground. Interestingly, this is somewhat counterintuitive because we often think that diversity alone will improve decision-making. But in reality, having some ideological homogeneity seems to be a crucial factor for diversity to have a positive impact. So, in the context of our overall theme, it shows us that the power of shared beliefs can actually help us leverage demographic differences more effectively, leading to richer, more nuanced discussions. Let's take a closer look at how gender and racial composition of judicial panels relate to dissent rates. Dissent rates serve as a clear signal of how much consensus or disagreement exists within a panel, as well as the complexity and ideological alignment of the legal reasoning. The slide highlights that we analyze these composition factors within a standard panel size, which allows us to see how variations in diversity might influence dissent behavior. Specifically, we're looking at judge panels, typically consisting of 3 judges, representing a range of geographic and ideological backgrounds. On a broader scale, we consider circuit courts, which are made up of 12 judges, providing a richer, more diverse mix of perspectives. This setup enables us to examine how different compositions might impact decision-making across different courts. And what's particularly valuable about this approach is the longitudinal aspect. We've collected over 20 years of data across multiple circuit courts. This long-term, high-quality dataset acts like a natural experiment, giving us a rare opportunity to observe these mechanisms in action over time in a real-world, high-stakes environment. Focusing on the U.S. Courts of Appeals, this case study allows us to test how diversity and composition influence judicial consensus, helping us understand the broader implications for legal reasoning and decision-making in the federal judiciary. On this slide, we're looking at how ideologically aligned groups can create a sense of psychological safety. When people feel safe to share their true viewpoints, especially on issues rooted in demographic differences, a more honest and thorough examination can take place. This safety is crucial because it encourages open dialogue rather than defensive reactions or entrenchment in existing beliefs. What happens then is quite important. Decision-making moves away from being driven solely by ideological priors. Instead, it becomes more about evaluating each case on its merits. This shift allows for more nuanced and balanced outcomes. Now, a key concept here is integrative complexity. This refers to how well an individual or group can consider multiple perspectives at the same time, exploring how these different viewpoints relate to each other before forming a judgment. It's like seeing the bigger picture, rather than sticking to a single, narrow perspective. In essence, demographic diversity combined with high integrative complexity reduces ideological bias. And this is the mechanism, or the process, that helps us make better, more balanced decisions. When people are able to hold multiple viewpoints simultaneously, it fosters more thoughtful deliberation and ultimately leads to more effective outcomes. Diversity works differently depending on where you start on the ideological spectrum. It's important to understand that the benefits of diversity aren't the same across all groups. For groups with a strong pre-existing ideological consensus, there can actually be more to gain from the friction that demographic differences introduce. As long as ideological cohesion stays intact, this friction can spark valuable debate and reduce bias. What this implies is quite interesting. It suggests that demographic diversity may be most beneficial precisely in areas where ideological conformity has been most uniform. These are the places where unchecked bias can do the most harm. We see this in the link between integrative complexity, meaning the ability to see multiple perspectives, and reduced ideological bias. This link is significantly stronger for more conservative judicial panels. So, when we ask who benefits most from diversity, especially in these settings, it's clear that conservative groups or panels might stand to gain the most, because diversity can challenge and broaden their perspectives in ways that lead to more balanced and less biased decision-making. So, the key insight here is that having both demographic diversity and ideological homogeneity together creates a condition for better deliberation that is more than just the sum of its parts. In other words, these factors are not simply additive. They interact in a way that enhances decision-making. What's particularly interesting is that demographic and ideological diversity can actually substitute for each other to some extent. For example, if a group is demographically diverse, it might require less ideological diversity to achieve good deliberation, and vice versa. But here's the catch. Combining both doesn't necessarily lead to even greater benefits. There's a sort of ceiling effect where adding more diversity in both areas doesn't produce additional gains. Now let's look at the substitution effect. When individuals are exposed to diverse groups, whether demographic or ideological, they tend to develop higher integrative complexity. This means they become better at considering multiple perspectives, which then influences their future decisions. This leads us to the idea of future complexity. Working in the right kind of group, with the right mix of diversity, helps build habits of integrative thinking. These habits don't just benefit one decision, they shape how individuals approach future issues. And finally, this isn't just about a single decision or scenario. The effects of engaging in diverse and ideologically focused groups extend beyond the immediate context. The experience gained influences how people think and decide in the future, which has important implications beyond the courtroom or any specific setting. So overall, creating the right mix of diversity and understanding their substitution effect can really foster more thoughtful, complex decision-making over the long term. Let's take a closer look at this slide. First, we see that demographic diversity alone, while important, can actually pose some risks. Without the right balance, it might lead to social fragmentation, where different groups become isolated or disconnected, and it doesn't necessarily lead to meaningful cognitive gains or better decision-making. On the other hand, ideological homogeneity, when everyone shares similar beliefs, can be dangerous too. It tends to promote groupthink, where dissenting opinions are overlooked, and blind spots develop because there's a lack of challenging perspectives. What's really interesting here is that when we combine these two factors, the diversity of backgrounds with more aligned or homogeneous beliefs, we can unlock something much more powerful. This combination fosters nuanced, debiase deliberation, allowing groups to think more critically and thoroughly. The Venn diagram visually captures this idea. It shows that our core contribution is understanding that it's at the intersection of demographic diversity and ideological homogeneity where the magic happens. It's not just one or the other that leads to better outcomes, but rather how they work together to promote what we call integrative complexity and reduce ideological bias. So overall, this relationship is central to our research because it highlights how combining these factors creates the optimal conditions for more thoughtful, balanced discussions. It's a key insight that ties back to our broader theme of improving group decision-making through strategic diversity and shared understanding. In today's polarized climate, it's important to understand that strategic composition, more than just diversity alone, is key to overcoming biased decision-making that often stems from ideological differences. Integrative thinking isn't just a goal, it's a skill that we can develop, and it's also the result of creating the right conditions. So, we need to cultivate complexity by fostering environments where different perspectives can thrive. Shared values play a crucial role here. They create a sense of safety that allows difference to become a true cognitive asset, rather than a source of conflict. Fostering common ground is essential. That means designing teams and panels thoughtfully, considering both demographic and ideological factors to ensure diverse perspectives are integrated effectively. Thinking compositionally reminds us that diversity isn't one-size-fits-all. Simply adding demographic variety without addressing the ideological climate can limit the cognitive benefits we're aiming for. The takeaway is that a nuanced approach to diversity, one that considers both who is in the room and how they interact, is vital for making better, more informed decisions. By focusing on strategic composition and creating the right conditions, we can harness the true power of diversity in our organizations.